Hey, so you're looking at that fresh D&D 5e character sheet, maybe for the first time, maybe you're just trying out a new class. And isn't there that moment, eyes scanning down the abilities and features, where you just feel a little bit like, whoa, okay, what is all this?
Yeah.
What exactly did I sign up for?
Oh, absolutely. That initial excitement is real. And then, you hit the paragraph about spell slots or wild shape or Kai points, and it feels like the game just presented you with a pop quiz you weren't ready for. It's
Yeah.
that moment where the cool concept meets the mechanical reality, and sometimes the reality bites a little.
Totally. You envision yourself being this incredibly versatile shapeshifter, maybe leaping across rooftops or crafting these incredible gadgets.
Yeah.
But then you see the list of rules, the things you have to track, the decisions you have to make every single turn, and just the sheer amount of information. It can feel like a wall. So this deep dive is all about helping you navigate that initial character creation landscape. We're specifically looking at some classes that, well, the source material suggests might be a tougher climb, adding a bit more of that mechanical complexity for someone brand new to the game.
And we're drawing insights today from an article over on LitRPG Reads. The piece was written by Ken Chan.
Titled, perhaps intentionally to catch your eye, why these three D&D 5e classes are the worst choices for first-time players.
Chuckles softly.
Yeah,
Grabs your attention.
it does. Now, it's important to note right up front, and the article itself clarifies this, these aren't bad classes in the game. Not at all.
Not even close. They're incredibly powerful and rewarding in the right hands.
Exactly. The title is provocative, sure, but the core idea is about the experience of a newcomer picking them up.
And that perfectly frames our mission today, really. Our goal isn't to tell you never play a druid or avoid monks at all costs.
Definitely not.
It's more to understand why, according to this analysis, some classes present these unique hurdles for folks just getting their feet wet. And more importantly, we want to explore what simpler options might be out there if you prefer like a gentler introduction.
And also, critically, how we as fellow players and DMs can best support new players who do choose one of these more complex paths. Because ultimately, the heart of D&D is the storytelling, right?
Yeah.
The shared laughter, the moments of heroism with your friends.
It's not about agonizing over rules minutiae, is it?
Not at all. Okay, let's unpack that core idea that before we even name names, what does the source say is actually happening when a class is challenging for a beginner? What are the fundamental issues that create this friction?
Well, the article makes a really important distinction. It's not just about a class having, say, low hit points or dealing low damage. That's more of a balance thing, maybe.
Right, different kind of issue.
Exactly. The hurdles it identifies for new players are in the internal complexity of the class itself. Ken Chan points specifically to convoluted mechanics, bloated decision trees, and arcane rules.
Bloated decision trees. I really feel that phrase.
Yeah.
It sounds like having so many options or steps for one single action that you kind of get lost deciding which path to even take.
Precisely. Think about taking your turn in combat. For a very simple class, it might be move here, hit that. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
For a more complex one, it could be, okay, do I use my action to attack or cast a spell? If I cast a spell, which one? Does it need concentration? What about my bonus action? Can I use a class feature there? Do I need a reaction ready for something? The source highlights that managing these kinds of complex systems, especially spell systems with daily preparation or unique resource pools like Key, puts significant pressure on a beginner.
And it's not just the in-the-moment pressure, is it? The article also talks about the pressure of making impactful choices about your character's build and abilities when you have almost zero practical experience playing the game.
Exactly. You pick a subclass or a specific feat at an early level, maybe level 1 or 3, and it might lock you into a certain play style or rely on mechanics you don't fully grasp yet. Then, maybe 5 levels down the road, you might realize that early choice doesn't synergize well with later abilities you get. Or maybe it just doesn't fit the reality of how your group actually plays.
And you're kind of stuck with it.
You're effectively stuck with a potentially suboptimal build that feels awkward to play, and you might not even know why it feels awkward.
Yeah, that hidden dependency on long-term synergy is something new players just can't possibly foresee.
It's impossible without having played. But the source also points to the weight of grasping multitudes of subtle game rules before your class abilities even make sense.
Like the difference between, say, an action, a bonus action, and a reaction. Those always trip people up at first.
That's a concrete example the article gives. If you don't fundamentally understand the difference between those three, and some classes use their core abilities as bonus actions or reactions,
You're lost from the start.
you're immediately confused about how to use your own character sheet. It adds layers of confusion on top of the basic turn structure. Or take material components for spells. Some classes have spells with costly or specific components you need to track. If you miss that rule, you might find you can't even cast a key spell you thought you had ready.
Oh man, that would be frustrating.
Totally. So the complexity isn't just in the class features themselves, but in how those features intertwine with and often demand a deeper understanding of the game's foundational mechanics.
Right.
Exactly. The source calls this system mastery. It argues that certain classes truly rely on nuanced rule interactions or a deeper mechanical knowledge to even function effectively, let alone shine.
And that makes it incredibly easy for a beginner to feel lost, ineffective, or like they're constantly slowing down the game because they're fumbling with rules interactions that veterans just take for granted.
And that inevitably leads to that feeling the article mentions where you look around the table and feel like everyone else just gets it and is doing it right while you're sitting there struggling.
Yeah, that am I doing this wrong feeling.
It's a very common outcome for a difficult start. While the source does acknowledge there's that rare beginner who relishes an uphill climb, someone who loves digging into complex systems right away.
Sure, those folks exist.
For the vast majority of new players, though, a challenging start means frustration. It means missed opportunities during gameplay because they didn't understand their options, and that disheartening sense of lagging behind the rest of the party.
Because, as the article rightly points out, the most fun part of D&D is the shared story, the laughs, the camaraderie, being heroic or hilarious with your fellow adventurers.
Exactly. It's not getting stuck trying to remember if your ability uses a bonus action or a reaction, or agonizing over a spell choice you made hours ago in-game.
Right.
A class that feels mechanically overwhelming for a newcomer can absolutely drain the joy out of that initial experience before they even get a chance to fully appreciate the core fun of collaborative storytelling and roleplay. The mechanics become a wall instead of a tool.
That makes so much sense. It's about reducing that initial friction to let the fun part shine through. So, based on the article, which classes does it identify as adding the most friction, the biggest stumbling blocks for a beginner? Here's where it gets really interesting. The source points to 3 specific ones.
Right. Ken Chan's analysis focuses on the Druid, the Monk, and the Artificer as the classes that most frequently present significant mechanical challenges for brand new players.
Okay, let's dive into class #1 then. The Druid. On the surface, it's incredibly appealing. Shapeshifting into animals, commanding elemental power, that deep connection with nature. It sounds like peak fantasy fulfillment.
And the fantasy is absolutely there. The flavor is incredibly strong, no doubt, and it draws players in. But the reality, as the article describes it, is that mechanically, it can quickly become a logistical labyrinth.
A logistical labyrinth. Okay, describe this labyrinth for us. What are the main challenges the source highlights with the Druid?
Well, the most prominent challenge the source points to is wild shape. It's called a whole subsystem unto itself.
Not just, I turn into a bear.
Not at all. This isn't just transforming. It requires the player to know and manage the stats and abilities of multiple beast forms. Imagine you're a new player just figuring out your own character's numbers and skills.
Which is hard enough.
Right. And suddenly on your turn, you decide to turn into, say, a direwolf. Now you need to find the direwolf's stat block, its armor class, its hit points, its attacks, special abilities like pack tactics, its speed, its senses. And you need to know how those numbers replace or interact with your own character's numbers.
Okay, wow. And figuring out how the beast's features work and sometimes conflict with your character's features. Like, can you talk? Can you cast spells in that form? Do you keep your character's passive perception? Stuff like that.
Exactly. You also have to keep track of which animals you can actually transform into, which often depends on your druid circle and your level. And understanding what actions are even possible in a specific form is crucial. Can that tiny spider form interact with objects effectively? Can that bear form use a grappling hook?
Probably not the hook.
Chuckles. Probably not. The article says this constant need to switch between your character's rules and a whole separate set of beast rules, often requiring you to look up stat blocks, can significantly bog down play, slowing down the game for everyone at the table.
Okay, wild shape sounds like a whole extra character sheet you have to manage, basically. What's the next major challenge the source points out for the Druid?
The Druid's spellcasting complexity is another big one, and it's different from how many other spellcasters work. Druids, like clerics, prepare spells daily. This means they have access to every single spell on the broad Druid spell list for their level.
Which is huge.
It is. But they must choose a limited subset from that massive list to have ready to cast each morning in-game.
So every in-game morning you have homework. You have to basically guess what kind of challenges you'll face that day.
Pretty much. The article emphasizes that this requires you to assess the day's likely encounters, environmental obstacles, tactical needs, and then select the right tools from your very wide toolkit.
And if you guess wrong,
Making the wrong call, choosing spells for, say, underwater combat when you end up in a desert doing social encounters, leaves you with a toolkit that simply doesn't fit the adventure. And that's a frustrating lesson in foresight and tactical planning that's incredibly difficult for a beginner to master without experience.
and spellcasting itself comes with its own complexities that the druid has to handle on top of everything else, right?
Right.
Like concentration, I know that's a big one.
Absolutely. Many of the most powerful druid spells require concentration to maintain, which means if you take damage and fail a constitution saving throw, poof, the spell ends.
Right?
So understanding which spells require concentration and managing that ongoing mental effort while also potentially being in a completely different wild shape form, it's just another layer of cognitive load.
Adding to that logistical labyrinth feeling. And what about the druid's role in the party? They seem like they can do a lot of different things.
That's the role ambiguity the source highlights. The druid can do a lot. Powerful control spells like Entangle or Spike Growth, robust healing spells, and they can be incredibly tough tanks when wild-shaped into a high HP animal like a bear.
So they can kind of do it all.
They can, but playing to all of these strengths effectively requires a nuanced understanding of when to shift gears,
Knowing when to be the big scary bear.
versus when it's better to stay in your humanoid form to cast a crucial healing word or a powerful area of effect spell. For a beginner, this paradoxical flexibility can lead to hesitation.
Yeah, I can see that. Analysis paralysis.
Exactly. You might spend precious seconds debating which form to take or which spell to cast, or you might try to do a bit of everything and end up feeling like you're just okay at everything, but not truly impactful in any single role. A diluted identity, as the source puts it.
Right. You see all the potential on the character sheet, but struggle to make it happen effectively during actual play.
And the source lists even more specific hurdles that add up. Managing spell components and understanding environmental limitations isn't always intuitive. Does this spell need a specific rare herb I don't have? Can I even cast it in this anti-magic field?
Things you don't think about until it's too late.
Exactly. Environmental adaptability, while a strength, often requires metagame knowledge you don't have yet, knowing what creatures might appear in a swamp to pick a relevant wild shape before you get there, for instance. Many druid spells have unique or situational effects that add complexity beyond just simple damage or healing. Your chosen druid circle abilities like Moon or Shepherd or Spores add yet another layer of specific rules and decision-making on top of the base class.
So you learn the core druid, then you learn the whole wild shape system, then you learn the daily spell prep, then you learn your specific subclass abilities. That's a lot of layers.
It is. The article stresses that mistakes with daily spell preparation can leave you feeling underpowered for an entire session because you simply didn't have the right spells ready for the challenges that actually came up.
Yeah, that feels bad.
And as we said, wild shape fundamentally changes what you can do, sometimes multiple times per game, which is a huge cognitive shift each time. Also, while you're in animal forms, your communication, spell use, and even party synergy can be limited until you've really mastered the form's capabilities and limitations and how they interact with your party.
Unless your party has somehow learned to understand bear growls, I guess.
Chuckles.
Yep.
Exactly. And some circles, like the Circle of the Shepherd with its spirit totems and conjuration focus, or the Circle of the Moon with its emphasis on combat wild shape, add even more advanced forms of resource management or buff tracking on top of the base class.
More things to remember.
All of this means the druid often requires frequent referencing of rulebooks, apps, or online resources during the game, which slows things down for a new player and can potentially make them feel less present and engaged at the table.
So, the source's summary for the Druid Challenge is essentially that it expects a new player to simultaneously be a tactical planner for spell prep, a kind of nature scholar for wild shape choices, a versatile magician, and capable of managing potentially confusing shifts in form and ability sets, all while participating in group dynamics. It absolutely rewards players who master it, but it heaps on too much too soon for a lot of beginners.
That seems to be the core argument. It's a deep, versatile class, absolutely, but that depth comes with significant mechanical requirements up front.
Okay, deep breath after that labyrinth. Moving on to class #2, the monk. This one seems simple on the surface, doesn't it? You're a martial arts master, fast, self-sufficient, just punch things, right? Seems straightforward.
That's the appealing facade. It conjures images of effortless, cool, and martial prowess, but the reality, as the article argues, is that mechanically it's a puzzle box that many new players often regret opening.
A puzzle box. Why is the monk a puzzle? What's puzzling about it?
The absolute defining feature, and often the source of difficulty, is the Kai system. This is a unique resource pool specific to monks. You get a certain number of Kai points based on your monk level,
Right.
which replenish on a short rest if your party takes short rests frequently enough.
Ah, that's a big if sometimes.
They can be. The challenge is that this pool, according to the source, evaporates quickly in play if not carefully conserved.
So you have a limited number of points to do all your cool monk things like flurry of blows,
Yeah.
stunning strike, and they run out really fast.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This creates a constant inner calculation for the new player. How much Kai do I have left? What does this ability I want to use cost? Is using K for flurry of blows now worth not having it for patient defense later if I get surrounded? Timing your Kai usage, knowing the costs of your various abilities, and making sure you have points when you really need them is critical, and the article calls it unforgiving if mismanaged.
Yeah, I can see that.
Burning all your kins in the first fight of the day leaves you feeling significantly less effective, less monk-like for subsequent encounters until you can hopefully get that short rest in.
That resource management sounds stressful for someone just trying to figure out how basic combat works. What else makes the monk tricky according to the source?
Mobility and positioning. Monks are designed to be incredibly mobile, they get extra movement speed, they can run up walls eventually, and their effectiveness heavily relies on using that mobility well.
Okay.
The source states their optimal play hinges on darting in and out of combat, using hit-and-run tactics, and always considering their place on the battlefield.
So you can't just pick a spot in melee and stay there like maybe a fighter could.
Not if you want to maximize your potential and, frankly, stay alive. You need to use your enhanced speed, features like Step of the Wind, which again uses time to disengage or dash as a bonus action to get to vulnerable targets or retreat to safety after attacking. The article points out that understanding basic movement on a grid map is already confusing for many beginners. Add in monk abilities that boost your speed, allow you to run on water or walls, or jump incredible distances, and things quickly spiral into complexity. You have to constantly be thinking about where you are, where the enemies are, what their reach is, any environmental hazards, and how to leverage your unique movement options every single round.
Okay, so you're managing a limited resource pool while also constantly thinking about complex movement and positioning. That sounds like a lot to juggle. What's the third challenge?
Fragility. This might surprise some people. Monks don't wear traditional armor. Their defense comes from their dexterity and wisdom scores, thanks to their unarmored defense feature, and from using Kahua for defensive abilities like patient defense, which lets them take the dodge action as a bonus action.
Right, they rely on avoiding hits.
Yes, but the source notes they don't always hit hard enough to make up for their relative fragility, especially at lower levels. They don't have the massive damage output of, say, a great weapon master fighter or a raging barbarian sometimes.
So they're not as durable as a fully armored fighter, or paladin, or a barbarian with a big pool of hit points and damage resistance.
Generally, no. They often have lower hit points than those frontline classes too, usually using a D8 hit die. New players, who are still learning the game's combat flow and how to assess threats, tend to take risks.
Sure, you want to get in there.
You do. So they might rush into melee, take a lot of hits because they didn't use their coup for defense or couldn't position perfectly, and find themselves quickly knocked unconscious, unsure of why their high dexterity wasn't enough to protect them. The combination of lower HP, no armor, and the need to spend a precious resource, not on offense, but sometimes just on basic defense, can lead to repeated knockouts for inexperienced monk players.
That would definitely be disheartening going down all the time.
It absolutely would.
Yep.
And finally, the source mentions a potential flavor versus mechanics disconnect. The monk's fantasy suggests channeling internal energy for powerful, almost magical effects. Think waifu movies or anime.
Yes, stunning people with a touch, running on air.
Right. But mechanically, the article argues, they lack the spell repertoire of sorcerers or wizards. Their cool abilities are fueled by Kai, which is a limited resource tied often to martial actions.
Ah, so you expect Dragon Ball Z, but maybe you get really good tactical maneuvering and hitting things a bit harder sometimes.
The article suggests this can be disheartening for some. A new player might envision leaping 50 feet through the air, firing energy blasts, or reliably stunning foes with a mystical touch, only to find that their core abilities often boil down to spending ki for extra attacks, flurry of blows, defensive actions, patient defense, or movement options, step of the wind. While Stunning Strike is powerful, it requires an attack roll to hit, and the enemy has to fail a Constitution saving throw, and it costs it. It's not a guaranteed flashy effect controlled entirely by the player in the same way casting a spell might feel. The core mechanics are often more subtle, tactical, based on positioning and resource use rather than overtly magical in the way a traditional spellcaster class is.
Okay, let's delve a bit more into those other specific monk hurdles the source listed. The action economy is confusing for monks, it mentions. Why is that?
It's specifically because so many of their core features like flurry of blows, patient defense, and step of the wind use their bonus action. Beginners often struggle just to remember they have a bonus action, let alone what they can do with it. The monk demands constant effective use of that bonus action to function well.
Right, you always have to be thinking about action and bonus action.
And many monk abilities have specific limitations, often requiring you to be unarmored and not wielding a shield to gain their benefits, like unarmored defense and martial arts. This really restricts your gear choices compared to other classes.
Yeah, no heavy armor monk.
Definitely not. The class also requires good dexterity and wisdom scores to function well. Dexterity for your attacks and armor class, wisdom for your armor class, and the saving throw DC of your kin, features like Stunning Strike.
So you're kind of spread thin, needing too high stats just to get the class working effectively, less flexibility in your build.
Exactly. The source also points out that many features rely on DM flexibility for cool moments, like running up walls or across water. The rules are there for unarmored movement improvements, but how easily and frequently the DM allows or facilitates these cinematic moments in the specific environment can vary. This could potentially frustrate a player who wants to do something awesome, but finds the rules or the situation don't quite support it as easily as they imagined.
Depends on the DM style.
There's also the mention of poor damage scaling versus other martials at higher levels in some analyses. While monks get many attacks with martial arts and flurry of blows, the damage per individual attack can sometimes lag behind classes that get access to powerful feats like Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter, or fighters with more attacks.
And that need for subtle, timing-based decision-making, like knowing when it's best to try for a stunning strike versus just dealing damage, when to use patient defense versus step of the wind, that's easily lost on new players who are still just trying to remember to roll their attack dice and add the right modifiers.
Absolutely. And finally, as we touched on, their reliance on short rests to recover their primary resource, Kai, may not fit well with every group's playstyle. If your party tends to push forward between fights and primarily relies on long rests to recover resources,
The monk is going to feel pretty drained most of the time.
they'll often feel significantly less powerful than their allies, like fighters who get action surge back on a short rest too, but less reliant, or spellcasters who recover most abilities on a long rest.
Okay, so wrapping up the monk, the source argues its intricate resource management with the Kai system, the vital but complex demand for smart positioning and movement, the potential issues with fragility requiring careful tactical defense, and maybe a disconnect between the class's cool flavor and its subtle timing-dependent mechanics make it a particularly tricky first pick for many.
It's definitely a class that asks a lot of the player in terms of tactical thinking and resource discipline right from level 1.
Okay, that's the puzzle box. Let's look at class #3, the Artificer. This is one of the newer classes officially introduced in 5e, and the fantasy is fantastic, isn't it? The promise of being an inventor, crafting magic items, blending arcane technology with spell work, it really speaks to creative minds.
It's an incredibly enticing concept, yeah, full of unique possibilities for roleplay and problem solving. But, according to the source, with all that inventive potential comes what it calls a tangled mess of mechanical requirements that can quickly overwhelm a brand new player.
A tangled mess. How did the Artificer get tangled? What makes it messy?
Well, the article describes the Artificer's playstyle as this intricate dance, trying to blend martial capabilities. They get weapon and armor proficiencies with inventive spellcasting and unique gadgetry through their infusions.
Okay.
And a key point the source makes right away is that each subclass you choose at level 3 ratchets up the complexity even further.
So it's not just complex on its own baseline, but your big decision at level 3 adds another significant layer of potential confusion or things to track.
Exactly. One of the core challenges identified is magic item interaction. The source argues that artificers interact with rules about magical items more than any other class as a core part of their identity, mainly through their infusion feature.
Infusions. Right, that's their unique thing.
It is. And to play one well, the argument goes, you don't just need to know your own character sheet. You need to understand how infusions work, the limitations on magic items, like attunement slots, and potentially have knowledge of magic item possibilities from various game books to make informed choices about which infusions are best.
Wait, so I might need to know my class rules, spell rules, combat rules, A&D, a bunch of rules about magic items, maybe even looking stuff up in the Dungeon Master's Guide or other source books as a beginner.
That's the potential burden the source highlights. For a fresh adventurer, just learning the basics of their spells and weapons is already a significant task. Adding the enormous burden of managing infusions, these temporary, customizable magic item properties you can apply to gear and change daily alongside understanding attunement. You can only benefit from a limited number of powerful magic items at a time, and making smart daily infusion choices based on anticipated needs. It's a lot to ask right out of the gate.
Infusions sound kind of like daily spell prep again, but for your gear. Is that fair?
They do have that daily decision-making aspect, yes, definitely, but with their own specific set of rules about what kinds of items can receive which infusions, how many infusions you can have active at once, which ones require attunement themselves, etc.
Okay.
Then there's the subclass complexity. The choice you make at level 3, usually Artillerist, Battlesmith, Alchemist, or Armorer, is described as a daunting decision, because each subclass adds a completely distinct and often complex mechanical layer onto the base class.
Right, you mentioned the Alchemist mixing potions, the
Yeah.
Artillerist with turrets, the Battlesmith with a robot dog.
Exactly. The Alchemist involves mixing different experimental elixirs with varied, sometimes random, effects you need to track. The Artillerist manages Eldritch Cannons, which are essentially magical turrets you command that act on your turn. The Battlesmith gets a Steel Defender, a mechanical pet that fights alongside you and has its own stat block, actions, and reactions you need to manage. The Armorer focuses on integrated power armor with different modes. The article notes that choosing one of these and then learning to optimize and manage its unique mechanics, like bonus action commands for the turret or defender, tracking elixir uses, switching armor modes, asks players to think deeply ahead about their character's growth and capabilities, both in and out of combat.
And managing a pet, like the Battlesmith Steel Defender or the Artillerist's Cannons, adds the complexity of running basically a second creature on your turn. Now, it seems like a big jump.
It absolutely does. You have to remember its abilities, its health, its turn order, or how it acts relative to your turn, and how it interacts with your own actions and bonus actions. It's effectively running two characters at once sometimes, which is a significant leap in complexity for a beginner just learning to manage one.
Definitely.
And finally, the source notes the reliance on intelligence and synergy. Artificers are heavily dependent on the intelligence ability score for their spellcasting effectiveness, for the number of spells they can prepare, for the strength of many of their infusions, and often for key subclass features.
So intelligence is king for them.
Pretty much. The article argues that failing to understand the importance of prioritizing intelligence during character creation, or not recognizing how your chosen subclass abilities and selected infusions are supposed to work together, synergy, may leave a character feeling lackluster in any one area.
So if you don't build your character's stats and features correctly from the start, focusing on that intelligence and understanding the combos, they might just feel kind of weak or ineffective.
That's the risk, yeah. You need high intelligence, but you often also need decent physical stats like dexterity or constitution for combat effectiveness and maintaining spell concentration. Balancing these stats effectively can be challenging for a new player. The source also points out the hybrid nature of the class being this mix of spellcaster, martial character to varying degrees, and item specialist.
Jack of all trades, master of none, potentially.
It can lead to analysis paralysis for a beginner. You might be unsure how best to contribute in a given situation when a clearer role, like the fighters hit things hard or the clerics heal and provide divine support, feels more intuitive and easier to execute.
We have so many different ways you could potentially help, but figuring out the most effective way in the heat of the moment is tough when you're new.
Right. Let's look quickly at some of the other specific Artificer hurdles the source mentioned. Infusions demand attention to daily or session-based tracking. You constantly have to remember what items you infused that morning, what exactly those infusions do, and that you can change them, which adds mental overhead.
More daily planning homework. Seems like a theme with complex classes.
It does pop up, yeah. Spellcasting requires planning around both known and prepared spells. Artificers technically know all their spells like a wizard does, but they prepare a limited list daily from their known spells, similar to a druid or cleric, so it's another layer of daily strategic choice.
Okay.
Many Artificer features, particularly infusions like giving someone an enhanced weapon or armor, and subclass abilities like the Battlesmith's Defender protecting an ally, rely heavily on party coordination and support. You need to understand what your teammates need most in terms of buffed gear or tactical support from your Petarette to be most effective.
So you need good communication with your party, too.
Definitely. The source also points out that some abilities might require referencing multiple books for rules or specific item lists. Similar to the Druid needing monster stats, the Artificer might need specific magic item descriptions or clarification on infusion rules, potentially slowing play if you don't have them handy.
Just like the Druid might need monster stats, the Artificer might need specific item descriptions or infusion details. Got it.
Exactly. Preparation involves frequent choices about gear infusions even before the session starts, adding pre-game complexity beyond just picking spells. And as mentioned earlier, over-optimization or poor planning can leave the character feeling weak, which is a significant negative consequence for a beginner's potential mistake in building or choosing infusions.
The article even highlights that the Artificer often requires DM or table buy-in for much of its creative potential, like some of the more inventive uses of infusions, crafting homebrew gadgets, or really leaning into the flavor elements might need discussion and agreement with the Dungeon Master to see if they fit the campaign or the rules interpretation.
That's a good point. And finally, just the sheer number of moving parts, spells, infusions, subclass features may be a pet, and the synergy required between them increases the chances of tactical mistakes. It's easy to use your limited resources, spell slots, infusion slots, bonus actions, in a way that isn't optimal because you didn't see the better combination or timing, especially when you're still learning the basics.
So the source's summary for the Artificer seems to be that blending martial combat, complex spellcasting, unique item mechanics with infusions, and distinct, often challenging subclass systems demands a significant amount of system knowledge and planning right from the start. It's high concept, which is definitely cool, but it requires high execution complexity.
It's a truly innovative class, no doubt, but it layers multiple complex mechanics, spellcasting, resource management, slots and infusions, item modification, and sometimes pet management on top of each other. Each of those could be a learning curve on its own for a beginner. Combining them all is definitely a big ask.
Wow. Okay, so according to the source, those are the 3 classes most likely to cause a beginner to stumble, due to their inherent mechanical complexity. The Druid, with its wild shape subsystem and daily spell prep, the Monk with its Kai management and crucial positioning focus, and the Artificer with infusions, item rules, and subclass-specific complexities. So listening to all that, you might think, okay, so I can't pick one of those, or are new players just doomed to struggle if they like those ideas?
Absolutely not. And this is where the source takes a really positive and honestly much more welcoming turn. It strongly emphasizes that selecting a simple, clear class for your very first character can make all the difference in building that initial confidence and comfort at the table.
And why are those simpler classes such a good starting point, according to this perspective?
Well, they tend to introduce the game's core systems, combat rolls, skill checks, saving throws, the basic turn structure more gradually and intuitively. Their primary roles and core mechanics are typically much easier to grasp right from the get-go, and this frees the new player up to focus on what's arguably the most important and fun part for a first-timer. The roleplay, interacting with the world and the other players, and really immersing themselves in the unfolding story.
Right, rather than being constantly heads down in their character sheet trying to do calculations or figure out complicated rule interactions they don't understand yet.
Exactly. It removes a lot of that friction from complex resource management or turn-by-turn calculations and just lets the player play and experience the game more directly. The article highlights several options it suggests are more beginner-friendly, even including a helpful little summary table.
Oh, great. So what classes does the source point to as good starting points for someone brand new?
The first one mentioned, probably the perennial favorite for simplicity and effectiveness, is the fighter.
The classic. The martial hero, sword and board, or maybe a bow.
Exactly. Why is it suggested? The source points to straightforward combat mechanics, minimal resource management.
Yeah, I mean, for a basic fighter, your turn often really boils down to move here and hit something with your weapon. You might have a fighting style that gives a passive bonus, or action surge for a quick burst, but the core loop is very clear and satisfying.
Precisely. Their primary role is very clear. frontline melee damage dealer and tank, or a reliable ranged combatant. Their strengths are obvious: high durability, often good hit points, and heavy armor proficiency, very easy to learn the core combat loop, and versatile weapon choices. They are pretty much the perfect class for learning how D&D combat works without getting bogged down in spell slots or Kai points or animal stats.
Okay, fighter is a solid, no-nonsense entry point. Made sense. What's next on the suggested list from the source?
The cleric.
Ah, the divine spellcaster, often seen as the party's main healer, but they can do more too.
Right. While they are full spellcasters, which sounds complex, the source argues their spell list is simple compared to a wizard or especially a druid. It's curated based on their chosen divine domain, which makes the list you actually prepare spells from each day smaller and more focused thematically.
Okay. Less overwhelming choice.
Exactly. They also tend to have a clear healing support role, giving a new player a very obvious and valuable way to contribute effectively right away. Plus, they are often strong at low levels, getting powerful spells and channel divinity features early on.
So you get introduced to spellcasting, but with a more manageable list and a very clear purpose in the party.
Yes. Their primary role is often healer and support, but depending on their domain, like War or Tempest, they can also be quite effective in melee or ranged combat. Their strengths often include good armor proficiency, sometimes heavy armor, like a fighter, great healing spells, obviously, and they can be quite flexible both in and out of combat with utility spells, too. They kind of ease you into spellcasting with a clear and impactful role.
Okay, cleric sounds like a good bridge into spellcasting.
Yeah.
And the third suggestion from the source for a beginner-friendly option.
The ranger.
Skilled tracker, the wilderness expert, maybe with one or two weapons.
The source likes the ranger because it offers a good mix of melee-ranged combat options, letting you try both. It has easy spells. Their spell list is much smaller than a cleric's or druid's, often focused on utility, nature themes, or enhancing attacks. And importantly, they learn spells differently. They know a fixed number of spells, rather than preparing from the whole list daily.
Oh, so no daily homework choosing spells. You just pick a few you like and always have them ready.
Exactly. Much less daily overhead. They also provide helpful exploration skills like Natural Explorer and Favorite Enemy, though those features have been revised and debated. The core concept of being good in the wild remains.
So you get a taste of fighting and a taste of magic, but neither system is presented in its most complex form on its own.
Right. Their primary role is often scout and ranged attacker, sometimes melee, often with utility and exploration and interacting with the natural world. Their strengths include good survival and tracking skills, potentially an animal companion, though some ranger subclasses, like the Beastmaster, do add a layer of pet management complexity. Similar to the Artificer, the base ranger concept is approachable, and they're strong at knowing the environment, which leans into roleplay and exploration rather than just complex combat mechanics.
So the source's overall point here is that recommending one of these simple, clear classes like fighter, cleric, or ranger isn't about telling a beginner they can't handle anything else or that these classes are boring. It's more about lowering the barrier to entry to build confidence and agency first.
Exactly. It's about empowerment, not hand-holding. It gives first-timers the space to learn the foundational rules of D&D combat, exploration, social interaction, to experiment with straightforward abilities, and to really lean into the roleplay and storytelling before needing to grapple with complex resource pools like Kellen, daily spell preparation from a vast list like the Druids, or managing entirely separate sets of statistics for wild shapes or infusions. And as the source notes, even experienced players find these classes satisfying and fun to play. They aren't just beginner classes, but they are particularly welcoming to beginners because their core mechanics are easier to grasp quickly.
That's a fantastic way to frame it, welcoming entry points rather than required starting places.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's the thing. What if you, or someone at your table, hears about the Druid's amazing shapeshifting, or the monk's martial arts cool factor, or the Artificer's incredible gadgetry, and despite hearing about the complexity, that's the concept they love and really, really want to play? Does the source just say, too bad, pick a fighter instead?
Absolutely not. And this is where the article provides some of its most valuable insights, I think. It offers excellent practical advice for how DMs and fellow players can effectively support new players who do choose to dive straight into one of these more challenging classes.
Okay.
It frames this not as, like, overcoming a bad choice, but as actively supporting their steep learning curve, helping them turn potential frustration into fascination, and helping turn inevitable missteps into valuable growth opportunities. The key, it stresses, is simple accommodations and consistent encouragement from the rest of the table.
Okay, this is crucial then. What are some of those practical strategies the source suggests for supporting a new player tackling a complex class like a Druid, Monk, or Artificer?
Well, a major category of strategies is helping them manage their mechanical loadout right at the start. The source suggests things like the DM or an experienced player helping them pre-select a beginner-friendly set of spells for their first few levels as a Druid or Artificer, maybe creating simplified class sheets that highlight only the most core abilities they'll use often, or making custom cheat sheets that explain key features like wild shape rules or key point costs in plain, simple language.
Yeah, I love that cheat sheet idea, like a little index card that just says, when you want to hit things extra hard, spend one key point and use Flurry of Blows as a bonus action right after you attack with your main action, instead of pointing them to a dense paragraph in the player's handbook every time.
Exactly. It prevents that initial paralysis of looking at a huge list of spells or a complex section of the character sheet and helps them quickly find what they need on their turn, keeping the game flowing.
Makes sense. What else?
Another vital strategy is to break down features incrementally. Don't try to explain every single nuance of wild shape rules or all the possible Artificer infusions at level 1 or even level 3. Introduce new concepts only as they become relevant in play.
Learn as you go.
Exactly. Explain the basics of transforming into a bear, then later, when they encounter a specific situation that requires it, explain how perception works in beast form, or what happens to their worn gear when they shift. Avoid that overwhelming rules dump right at the beginning.
Yeah, learning things just as you need them makes so much more sense than trying to absorb a whole manual up front before you even play.
And the source strongly recommends one-on-one coaching when possible. This could be a quick chat before the session starts, stepping aside during a break, or even using private messages in a virtual game environment. It allows the new player to ask specific questions without feeling like they're holding up the entire game or looking inexperienced in front of the whole group.
Oh yeah, that feeling of slowing down the game is a huge source of anxiety for a lot of beginners. Making it safe and easy to ask questions is absolutely key.
It truly is. Reframing abilities is also important, the article suggests. Use plain language to describe what an ability does in the game world, what its effect is, not just its mechanical steps. Highlight practical choices for them. I mean, to be saying, this spell, Entangle, is great for stopping those goblins from reaching the rest of us. Or, you could use your key here with Patient Defense to make yourself much harder for that big ogre to hit this turn.
So helping them see the effect and tactical use of their ability rather than just the rule attached to it.
Right. Gently guide them towards smarter tactics as they learn, focusing on the positive outcome rather than criticizing their mechanical execution if they make a less optimal choice. And perhaps most importantly, encourage their focus on the flavor and roleplay aspects of the class.
Huh.
Remind them why they were excited about the class concept in the first place. Let them explore being the wise nature protector, the stoic martial artist finding inner peace, or the quirky inventor tinkering with gadgets. Mechanical mastery is a journey. The joy of inhabiting the character can happen immediately.
Let them live the fantasy first, and the mechanics will follow as they get more comfortable. Love that.
Yes. And pacing is absolutely key. Set realistic expectations, both for the player and the table. A new player tackling a complex class will make mistakes. They won't always make the optimal tactical decision, and that's perfectly okay. Create safe opportunities for them to experiment. Maybe throw in a less deadly combat encounter specifically designed so they can try out different wild shapes or see how their infusions work without super high stakes.
And when, not if, those mistakes happen, what does the source suggest?
Frame those mistakes as learning opportunities, not failures. The article encourages celebrating creative problem solving, even if it wasn't the most mechanically efficient choice according to the rulebook. Did they use an infusion in a weird but clever way? Awesome. Did their monk try to tripwire an enemy using Kai-fueled Step of the Wind? Cool. Empower them to own their journey, missteps included. Show them, through the table's reaction, that the game is about fun and shared experience first, and mechanical mastery is something you build towards gradually over time, together.
It really boils down to creating a patient, supportive, and encouraging table environment, doesn't it?
It really does. The source lists even more specific practical tips to help create that environment. Provide those custom cheat sheets outlining their key features, what they cost, action, bonus action, Kai spell slot, and when they can be used.
Make it easy to reference.
Simplify their spell or ability lists initially by suggesting a core set of reliable, beginner-friendly options for the first few sessions, rather than overwhelming them with the entire list. Offer brief session summaries, maybe just a sentence or two afterwards, that specifically highlight good mechanical or roleplay choices they made and gently explain why they were effective. Positive reinforcement goes a long, long way.
Hey, remember when you used your Druid's bonus action to cast Healing Word on the fighter? That kept him in the fight. Great call. Something like that.
Exactly like that. Or, that was a really clever use of your Artificer infusion to get past that trap. Use incremental rule introductions. The source even suggests potentially assigning an in-game mentor NPC, maybe an older druid, a wise monk master, or a guild artificer who the character can turn to for advice or clarification within the story itself.
Ooh, that's a brilliant way to integrate support right into the narrative.
Isn't it? Also, encourage roleplay-focused sessions with fewer complex combat encounters, especially early on. Give them space to breathe, get comfortable with their character's personality, and learn the basic mechanics without the constant pressure of needing to perform optimally every 6 seconds in a fight.
Let them get comfortable just being your character before throwing them into the deep end of combat math and tactics.
Precisely. And remind the whole table to celebrate small victories and creative play, not just optimal tactics. It's easy for experienced players to sometimes get focused on optimization. Encourage everyone to appreciate the cool story moments and clever ideas, even if they weren't the best move.
Yeah, foster that collaborative spirit.
Definitely. Break down complex subsystems like wild shape forms or infusion management into easy, step-by-step processes that feel manageable when you first introduce them. Pre-fill character sheets with key numbers like attack bonuses, spell save DCs, and AC to reduce their on-the-fly math anxiety, especially in the first few sessions.
Less calculation pressure up front, more focus on playing.
Yes. And fundamentally, maybe the most important thing. Establish a questions are always welcome norm at the table. Make it clear through your words and actions as a DM or experienced player that asking for clarification is expected and encouraged, never judged or seen as slowing things down.
Create that safe space.
Exactly. Use shared digital tools or apps if you're playing online or if the table likes them. Many VTTs or apps are specifically designed for spell or ability tracking and can simplify the process significantly for complex classes. And finally, the source suggests being willing to allow quick rewinds or do-overs for honest beginner mistakes. If a new player totally misunderstands how an ability works or picks the wrong target because they misheard something vital,
Doesn't take it back?
maybe just let them rewind a few seconds, explain the role gently, and let them try again knowing what they know now. It's about learning, not punishment.
That's incredibly generous and collaborative. It really emphasizes that the goal is shared fun and learning together, not strict adherence to rules perfection from day one.
It absolutely is. It transforms the potential struggle of picking a complex class into a supported learning experience where the player feels like they're growing with encouragement from their friends, not failing alone.
Okay, so bringing all this together, what does this deep dive into the source material really tell us about rolling our first D&D character and jumping into the game? What's the big picture takeaway?
Well, I think it tells us that choosing your first D&D class is a really exciting step, full of possibility and cool concepts. The analysis from Ken Chan at LitRPG Reads reminds us that when a class feels difficult for a beginner, it's not really a judgment on the quality or coolness of the class itself. Druids, monks, artificers are awesome.
Totally.
It's more a reflection of the mechanical experience and system mastery required to play it effectively right out of the gate. Complex classes like those three require patience and probably significant support from the table to feel smooth for a newcomer. Simpler ones like the fighter, cleric, and ranger offer a smoother, less mechanically demanding entry point that lets new players focus more easily on the fun of collaborative storytelling first.
And the role of the table, the veteran DMs and the fellow players is absolutely vital here, isn't it?
It couldn't be more crucial. They are the ones who can make that class selection moment, regardless of the class chosen, feel like a celebration of possibility, not a potential stumbling block or source of anxiety. Through active encouragement, patience, breaking down complex rules simply, and using some of those clever support strategies we talked about, they can help any player, regardless of their chosen class, find confidence, agency, and genuine delight in the game.
And always remember, the core of D&D, as the source reminds us throughout, it's about shared storytelling, laughter, and learning together. The mechanics ultimately serve the story and the fun at the table, not the other way around.
Absolutely. The article leaves us with a fantastic final thought that really encapsulates this whole idea perfectly. Mastering D&D is a journey, not a sprint. Every misstep is a chance to grow. Every unexpected result is a story for the ages.
I love that.
Me too. It continues, saying that with the right start, whether that's a simple class or a complex one with great support from the table, the rules become less of a hurdle and more of a toolkit for adventure.
A toolkit for adventure. That's the goal. Ultimately, then, there are no wrong choices for your first character, only different roads to the same magical destination. What truly matters is the fun you have, the stories you tell, and the friendships forged around that table.
Absolutely. Giving new players a solid foundation and, most importantly, a supportive environment ensures they get the chance to fall in love with this amazing hobby at their own pace, whatever class they choose.
Well said. A big thank you for the fantastic insights we were able to draw from Ken Chan's article over at LitRPG Reads today. Really useful stuff. And also to Paul Bello, a fine feller indeed, for providing the platform where that valuable resource lives.
Indeed. Great article, great platform.
And we would absolutely love to hear from you out there listening. What were your first classes in D&D or other RPGs? Did you find them easy or challenging? What classes do you think are surprisingly complex for beginners, maybe ones we didn't even mention here?
Yeah, or what are your best tips for supporting new players at your table, especially those who pick one of these complex options like a druid or monk?
Or maybe just, what beginner-friendly classes would you personally recommend based on your experience? We'd love for you to kick back and share your thoughts, experiences, and advice in the comments. From your D&D campaigns?
Yeah.
Player characters, NPCs, cursed items. Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear them.